guys, and thank you for joining me. I am Chrysalis, and this is Woman on Wrestling. This is the second part of a two-part series on pro wrestling primer or wrestling terms. The first video I'm going to link for you right up in here, so if you haven't had a chance to check that out yet, by all means, please do so. If this is the first time that you're joining me, welcome. I appreciate you being here. I try to do as much as I can to provide the WWE and all things professional wrestling with content from a female perspective. So again, thank you for taking some time with me today. Let's head into the second part of my pro wrestling primer in terms that will help you understand pro wrestling more as a job, or to job, if it's an adjective in some way, shape, or form. To job is to lose, basically, and a jobber is usually a no-name, no recognition wrestler who is constantly thrown in to lose to a larger named wrestler, or to lose to a sort of a mid-card wrestler that they are trying to work on pushing. And we'll get to those terms again in just a little bit. So to job is to lose. A jobber is someone that regularly loses their matches, and that's pretty much all they're good for, is just filler in order to try to help promote a different performer in some way, shape, or form. A promo is a non-wrestling storyline development element. It is usually the performer themselves talking either to an interviewer or directly to the camera to speak to the WWE universe, as it were, and it's usually verbal. It's generally improv. It can be scripted. A lot of times, I know, especially in the WWE, creative will provide performers with promos that they want them to do. And from what I understand, depending on the level of the performer and how well they are at improv and how over they are with the crowd and how comfortable they are allowed some freedom to improv their promos when they do them. Becky's a good example of that, Becky Lynch. The Rock obviously was phenomenal when it came to cutting promos. Austin was usually really good at cutting promos. So you have these performers that are certainly good at generally tell when you are watching a performer cut a promo how comfortable they are in doing so, but also how much they are improving. Because you can, when somebody's improving, you can almost always tell, because there's a level of relaxation that comes along with how they perform. AJ Styles is another good one who's great at promos. He's very natural with them. He's very easy with them. Big E is amazing with promos. And you can also tell the performers that even Seth Rollins has gotten to the point where he's really good at cutting a promo. Though his are a bit more, you could tell with Seth, he's usually a bit more comfortable when it's a bit more planned. Not necessarily scripted, but when there's a plan to it, compared to just completely on the fly. So that leads us into the promos and your performances getting pops and heat. So a pop is a positive reaction from the audience. Usually Edge coming out to Royal Rumble this past year and returning to wrestling after 9 years away and after 9 years of being retired. That was a huge pop. It is a positive reaction from the audience. Heat is a negative reaction from the audience. Baron Corbin, yes, it used to be Baron Corbin. King Corbin is absolutely amazing at getting heat. No matter what that man does, he will get heat. The audience just hates him, and that's exactly how he wants it to be. That's what he's going for. He is a heel. He will probably always be a heel, and that's getting that heat is what he lives for. He feeds off of it. When you are a good heel, you're gonna feed off that heat. You're gonna take that in and go, yes, they hate me, and you are gonna revel in it, and you are gonna love it, and it's an amazing feeling, I will tell you. It is much easier to be a heel and get heat than it is to be a face and get a really solid pop. It is really difficult to be a face and get a solid pop. There's also things called cheap heat and cheap pops. The easiest example of that in either direction is if you have a face or a heel come out and say something about what city they're in and how good that city is or how horrible that city is. That is a cheap pop and cheap heat. Either way, it always works. It's just the nature of the human condition, and the performers will take that in and they know how to use it. So that is a pop and heat and how you use both. A push is Vince or whoever is in creative that is developing the storylines saying, okay, this performer has been putting in their dues. They've been doing a great job. They have been trying really, really hard to do everything that they need to do. The audience is starting to catch on to them. The audience is starting to feed off of them. The audience wants to see more of them. And therefore, since the audience wants to see more of them, we're going to give them a push. We're going to write them more storylines. We're going to give them more promos. We're going to provide them with more opportunity to further their gimmick and further their brand. That works in either direction, whether you're a heel or a face. If you're getting a push, that means that the audience is reacting to you how they should. And because of that, you are getting more opportunity. To get over is to get a crowd reaction. So again, whether it's a pop or whether it's heat, you are over if your character is getting a reaction from the crowd, whether that's positive or negative. Now, if you're a face and you're getting heat from the crowd, you're still getting over, but you're not getting over the way you want to get over. Vice versa, if you're a heel and you're getting over with pops and the audience loves you. A good example of that was when they were trying to get Becky Lynch to do a heel turn. And that didn't work the way it was because the audience got behind her and loved the fact that she was acting the way she was acting. She was fighting back against Charlotte. She was fighting back against the establishment. Here was this person that had had everything handed to them. And here is Becky living in their shadow, busting her butt, day in and day out to try to get what Charlotte was being given. The audience responded to that. And instead of making her a heel, she became an anti-hero, basically. Becky and Austin are in that field of, they're not really a heel and they're not really a face. They're in that anti-hero gray area, as it were, and they can go either way. Though predominantly they're usually going to be considered a face because of how over they are with the audience. So that's what being over is. It's when the audience buys into the storyline that you are selling. They get behind you and are invested in the character that you are portraying. Now, another term is to be put over. So obviously, if you are over, you are getting a reaction, the reaction that you want from the audience. To put someone over generally means that one talent is basically helping to give another talent a push and to make sure that that other talent kind of becomes someone or something that the audience is now invested in. Daniel Bryan is doing that currently with Drew Gulak. And from what I understand as well, he has sort of taken certain performers under his wing in order to try to put them over a bit more with the crowd, because as he is moving more towards retirement, moving more towards a lighter schedule, he sees some of this newer, younger talent that has come in that has amazing abilities, but they're not getting the push from creative and from Vince and from the higher-ups that he feels they should be getting. So he has stepped in as an established performer, as an established face and heel, to say, hey, look, we have some talent here that I really like to put over. Please give me the opportunity to do so, and he has been allowed to do that. So to put someone over is to basically have one talent come in, usually an established talent, big name recognition. The audience loves them or hates them, and they in turn take another talent in and sort of apprentice them almost, as it were, and either work with them or work against them to help the audience become invested in this new talent that's coming in. Conversely, generally speaking, performers who are more well established can also do something called carrying a match. When you carry a match or when you carry a fight, that means that one performer is doing a majority of the work, and the other performer is either not up to speed, not experienced enough, not reading the crowd, just not getting it as much. So usually the more established talent, it's not always the case, but usually it's the more established, more experienced talent will carry the match and basically make sure that they both get through the match safely, so that later on backstage they can have a strong talking to with each other and everyone else and try to figure out what went wrong and what needs to be improved. As a performer, you don't want to have to carry a match. Carrying a match is not fun. Carrying a fight is not something that you want to do. I have been on both ends where I have had someone carry the match for me, and later on I have been in fights where I have had to carry the match for someone else. It's not a comfortable experience even as an experienced performer. It's not something you want to have to do. Usually there is a lot of discussion after the fact about what went wrong, what happened, what could have been done better, where improvements need to be made. And generally speaking, you want to take those experiences as a learning experience so that you can improve and be better. A really good example of this in the WWE was Ava Marie, and everyone knows the storyline there on how, you know, she came in initially, she was really gung-ho, she wanted to do a lot of stuff. She was horrible because she wasn't given time to actually put in the work that needed to be done. When she was given the opportunity to go down to the training center and actually train and was given that one-on-one, she had some significant improvement, and people started to see that. But for the longest period of time when she was in the ring, she needed to be carried. And that's not fair to the person being carried, and it's not fair to the person that has to carry them. But it is something that happens, and it's a word that you may hear from time to time. So next on my list is a bump. Now, a bump is just basically a fall. It's whether you're hitting the mat, it's whether you're hitting the outside of the ring, it's whether you're hitting the stairs, it's whether you're hitting the table. A bump is a fall. The first thing you learn how to do when you are doing stage combat is how to fall properly. Both forwards, backwards, sideways, you name it. If you do not know how to fall properly, you are not only going to have an extremely short career, but you are going to hurt more than just yourself in the long run. So learning how to take a bump is really, really important. But anytime you basically make contact with the floor in some other way than with your feet, you're taking a bump. A spot is a scripted move. So a lot of people will sit there and say, well, wrestling is fake. It's all fake, it's all scripted, blah, 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 blah. So I will be the first person to tell you, wrestling is not fake. There is nothing fake about hitting the ground. There is nothing fake about doing a swanton. There is nothing fake about jumping off a ladder onto a table and crashing your opponent through it and you both hit in the ground. There is nothing fake about a knife hand. There is nothing fake about a lot of different things. Now, it is all scripted to a degree, yes. It is predetermined. You know what the angle is going to be. You know what the outcome is going to be. I would say about 85 to 90% of what wrestlers do inside and outside the ring is improvised sports entertainment. They will take a few minutes beforehand to say, okay, what spots do you want to get into this match? Now the spots are, okay, these are the moves that I want to do. These are the moves that I want to showcase. You know that, Drew McIntyre is going to put in a Claymore kick. You know that in some way, shape, or form, Bray Wyatt is going to use his Sister Abigail, or he's going to try to go for a mandible claw. You know that King Corbin is going to go for an end of days. You know that Brock Lesnar is going to do an F5. You know all these different moves and all these different things that all these wrestlers do. You know that at some point in time, Jeff Hardy is going to do a swanton off whatever item he could possibly do a swanton off of. These are spots. They are moves that are scripted within the improvised match. That being said, most of the wrestling that you're doing inside the ring, or most of the performance that you're doing inside the ring, is improvised. So you have what's called calling a match, or a call. And that's what happens when they lock up. When, two wrestlers lock up at the beginning, that's the, okay, we're here, what are we going to do next? Usually speaking, it's going to be the more experienced wrestler that is going to further and make the calls. That's going to go back and forth throughout the match. A lot of times it will be the heel making the calls, because a lot of times it's the heel that is responsible for putting over the face and making the face look good. A lot of times too, again, when you're calling a bump in particular, whoever is the one taking the bump is going to be the one that calls the bump. So, if somebody's getting thrown, they have proceeded to tell their opponent, hey, look, now's a good time to do this, throw me. And so that would be them calling the bump that they're going to take. So a call is basically when the wrestlers work together and one of them determines what the next move is going to be on an improvised standpoint within the ring. Stiff. To work stiff. Again, this goes along with the fact that wrestling is not fake. That's the wrong word for what professional wrestling is and what sports entertainment is in general. To work stiff, or to have strong style, as it's also called, I know Shinsuke Nakamura is not, known as the king of strong style. When you work stiff, you are not pulling your punches. You are not pulling your kicks. You are actually making contact at a level that is above and beyond what is needed. There is a lot of thought process on why that's needed at times. Certain moves, in order to get the sound that you need to get for the audience to be invested, you have to actually hit them. The slaps on the chest, the knife hands on the chest, those are usually done stiff, and you can usually tell because you'll see the red mark across the chest when it's all said and done. Are punches and kicks and things pulled? Yes, they're pulled for safety reasons, and they are done in such a way so that they look like they hurt when in reality they don't. But if you are working stiff, then you are not pulling your punches, you are not pulling your kicks, you are not pulling your hits, and you're actually doing some damage. Now, that leads us into some simpler terms like a finisher. Now, a finisher is obviously a finishing move. Claymore kick, twist of fate, curb stomps. I'm trying to think. End of days. I honestly like the finishers that have creative names to them. It makes a little bit more sense, especially when it fits the gimmick and the angles and everything else. But regardless, a finisher is basically that particular performer's end move. Disarmer. The figure 4 leg lock, the figure 8 leg lock, the sharpshooter. Those are all finishing moves. They are supposed to be moves that are so unbelievable that no one can kick out of it, or no one can, somebody's gonna always tap out of it. I absolutely love the fact that there's a Kirifuda clutch, and really all it is a triangle chokehold, which is just, why, it's a funny name for a very simple move. But regardless, a finisher is basically a performer's finishing move. It's supposed to be their end-all be-all. It's supposed to be how they end the match and how they show that they have dominance over that particular opponent. Next are two words that you're not going to hear as much anymore, and this is something I've noticed considerably, having returned to watching wrestling or professional wrestling from not watching it for about 20 years, roughly. The first word is juice. Juice can go two ways. To juice basically means that you have adrenaline going through your body. I think Nia Jax is a perfect example of this. She gets juiced up before a match, adrenaline kicks in, she doesn't know her own strength sometimes, and then accidents happen. Either way that you use the word juice, it's not necessarily a good term. So there's juice meaning adrenaline, and getting this adrenaline rush and not being able to control yourself or the match as well because you're on an adrenaline high. The other word for the other use for the word juice is bleeding, and it's to bleed. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when someone was juicing, it was because they had cut themselves, usually with a razor blade, on their forehead, and now all of a sudden they were juicing, and that was a big thing. We have moved away from that considerably as society has evolved, and as such as professional wrestling and sports entertainment has evolved as well. So you won't hear or see the word juice or juiced used as much anymore. Going along with that is the term hard way. So if someone is juicing the hard way, they're bleeding from an accident instead of intentionally. Hard way means that somebody has gotten injured accidentally instead of scripted or planned or in some way, shape, or form part of the storyline. That has a good example is Nia Jax punching Becky Lynch in the face and giving her a concussion. That was her getting a concussion the hard way. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something that they were going to have the storyline progress to. It's an accident that happened that caused a real life injury. So hard way is not something that you hear as much anymore either. Getting hurt the hard way is not fun. I've seen that happen to so many people on so many varying levels, from everything to, broken fingers and broken bones, to dislocations, to deviated septums, to concussions, you name it. I've seen it firsthand for the most part. Getting hurt the hard way is not the way you want to get hurt, ultimately, when it's all said and done. And that leaves me with the last two terms. And the last two terms that we have are a mark. So a mark is someone that believes the kayfabe. They buy into it. Basically, we are all marks in some way, shape, or form when it comes down to it. What level of a mark you are depends considerably on how strong your suspension of disbelief happens to be. Kayfabe is presenting something as real or legitimate when it's not. So you'll hear kayfabe quite frequently, especially on the WWE universe and within anything social media related. And what happens is that a long time ago, again, in a galaxy far, far away, people figured out that wrestling was not actually Olympic style wrestling and that it was scripted and there was a storyline that the performers were following. Once that happened, people still continue to go to professional wrestling, and there was actually a great video that someone did of Al Snow explaining what kayfabe was, and I'm gonna try to put that up here again as well to cross-reference it for you if you're interested in seeing it. But he gave this great story of how when we go to the movies, we know that the movie is fake. We know that these characters don't exist, but yet for that 2.5, 3 hours, we let our suspension of disbelief go and we buy into what the story is telling us. That's exactly what wrestling does, and that's exactly what kayfabe is. In order to maintain kayfabe, if you were two wrestlers who were in a feud, which is also a term that's not used anymore, but if you were in a feud, if you were in a fight, if you were in a storyline, you didn't associate with each other outside of the locker room because you didn't want the fans to see you guys associating with each other on a friendly basis, and then all of a sudden you've now broken kayfabe and now the audience has that fourth wall crumbled, and they can no longer buy into the storyline that you're trying to sell them because they've seen what the reality is. So kayfabe is presenting something as real or legitimate when it's not. A good example of that right now is, Lana is married to Rusev, but Lana on WWE is married to Bobby Lashley. So the kayfabe there is that Lana and Bobby are married and Rusev is gone. Obviously that's not the case. She's married to Rusev in real life, but we buy into that storyline, or we tried to buy into that storyline, and that's what kayfabe ends up being. So a mark is someone that buys into the storyline, and kayfabe is the storyline being presented as reality so that we, as the audience, can have those couple of hours or those couple of weeks or those couple of minutes online to sit there and go, yeah, that was cool. That was fun. That was a suspension of disbelief, and I enjoy that. And kayfabe is maintaining that level so that your audience can have that escapism for a short period of time. Alright guys, so that is going to wrap up video number 2 of the Pro Wrestling Primer and wrestling terms for your use. I do hope that you have enjoyed the content I have been able to provide for you today and that you've gotten something out of my videos so far. If you have, by all means, please hit the subscribe button and notification bell below so that you can be updated when I upload some new content. I try to do so once a week, if not more or less, depending on what my schedule will allow. And if you could also give me a like, so that will help get me a little bit more exposure, and that way I can continue to grow this channel for myself and for you guys. That would be greatly appreciated. And until next time, see you then.